and I thank you for that. So you're obviously aware that we have an item very shortly that is related to this. So thank you very much. Next item is local board input. We've had 2 approved and 1 request deferred, and that was from the Hibiscus and Bays local board. It's related to the National Land Transport Program, which local board chairs have been invited along to the workshop following this in regards to that. So first one up is Kath, Waiheke local board. Welcome, Kath.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Chair, tēnā koutou katoa. You will have read the notice of motion that I'm going to be speaking to today, which has been passed unanimously by the Waiheke Local Board. It concerns where the bus route terminates downtown for what is called the hospital bus from Waiheke, which takes people variously, particularly up to or back from Auckland City Hospital and out to the Green Lane outpatients clinics, and anyone discharged from hospital normally ends up going to those, sometimes repeatedly. The connectedness of the ferries, and these are all ferries, not just Waiheke ferries, to that bus have been an issue for us for over 8 years. And I have been advocating for a reconsideration by Auckland Transport. In this case, it is now land which is managed by Ekipanuku, to bring the hospital bus right up by the ferry terminal. And the reason is that it can be a walk of up to 350, at worst 400 metres to get to the current bus stop. And that is along an exposed road with no weather protection. Most people with significant mobility issues, and that includes the elderly, frail, cannot do that. It is simply too far. If you have, some people are entitled to a discounted taxi service, but not if your injury or disability is temporary. So that also applies to people being discharged from hospital. And as you all know, if you're admitted to A&E, the job of A&E is to diagnose and to move you into bed or move you out. And their policy at the Auckland City Hospital is to have somebody with you to take you home. That isn't the case for most people from Waiheke. Don't have somebody to take them home because the cost of getting there and the time to get there is huge. So that could be at the cheapest end is $44 just to make the trip across on the ferry. And lots of people do not have support people anyway, most particularly the elderly, frail and those with mental health issues. We have had the backing since the finger wharfs were consented or applied for as consent. We've measured the distances, we've made the case, and we've had the support of our health trusts in this advocacy. And their letters are attached, and they go back, I think, to 2018. So it is what looks like a really simple ask, and there isn't anybody I've ever spoken to who doesn't get this and say, oh yeah, that's really simple, isn't it? Except, in this case, I'm going to say Ekipanuku and AT, because they have recently met with a senior advisory panel and a letter went to them, which was then replicated in some quotes in our local newspaper, essentially saying, I think incredibly dismissively, that the distance is only 200 metres, I'm paraphrasing, and that people can get half-price taxis. There are plenty of people on fixed incomes who cannot afford half-price taxis, And if you're a radiotherapy patient doing daily radiotherapy, you don't necessarily have, and are frail, you are not necessarily going to have an available 40 to 50 bucks a day or 30 to 40 a day to do this on top of your fare to get to the ferry. This applies to all those needing to visit the hospital, Auckland City Hospital, from any other ferry terminal as well. So if you're, for instance, in Devonport and you don't have a driver's licence and your grandchild's in Starship Hospital, you are going to have the same issue. So this isn't just a Waiheke issue, but the issue for us is we've got no other way to get in and out of hospital and to those clinics. So I am asking to be relieved of 8 years of advocacy, and one of the things that has irked me here is I don't know what other avenues I couldn't have tried. I've got letters, I've been to, everyone says go over there, go to the senior advisory panel, tick, go to the disability, tick, go to AT leadership, tick, talk to the CEO and the leadership, tick, go to Panuku, tick, go back to the designers for downtown, tick. Just keep on going, Kath, because nobody is going to do anything for these most vulnerable people in our community. And I'm asking you, please, to actually work with AT and Eki Panuku and get this done. Thank you.
Thank you, Kath. Question, Angela.
Thanks, Kath. And thanks for bringing it to the Seniors Advisory Panel too, which opened all our eyes to it. And I think Auckland Transport got multiple emails and letters. But has anybody ever explained exactly why the buses are not allowed on Queen's Wharf to do this?
Well, I have read that it's not policy. I read that in a letter written to somebody in the senior advisory. I thought it was a policy, stopping public transport going on there. But I haven't had a definitive answer. It is to do with bus routes. It is to do with the congestion that's already there. But the congestion, if you come off a ferry like I do often, you'll see one or two people from the Waiheke ferry get a taxi. They're most Uber. And if you Uber from down there, they're not there. They're not paid. They're not waiting there. They're waiting down the road. The taxis are there, by and large, out of their cars, chewing the fat together because it's a free car park. Or if they've got access, maybe they're parking. So tour buses for cruise liners, you can fit a whole heap of those on that wharf. And that is one of the reasons that we can't do this, because apparently there are 95 cruise ships coming this year. So those people who can't walk from a cruise ship up the road do get priority, as do people picking up, dropping off, and the taxis, which don't need to be in there. Auckland Airport solved this ages ago, right? You just bring them in. They're on a system whereby they are queuing somewhere else and go to the wharf when they need, when there's a gap.
Yeah, kaha, Kath. Chair, perhaps we could pick this up. I don't know if you have anything in mind, but if we can end the 8 years of pain and suffering. Kia ora. Thank you, Kath.
Thanks, Angela. Richard?
Thanks, Chair. And Lindsay Waugh from the panel did bring this up with me a few weeks ago, and I hadn't realised this has been going on for so long. Just with the flexibility, with those moving it from the Britomart site into Queen's Wharf, is there a trial or like a intermediary thing where we could do a couple a day, like some peak ones as a starter, because maybe the issue is that it's congested at certain points of the day. Would it be good if you did 2 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon, or I don't know, as a starter?
It's very difficult because people are going, if you're going to outpatients or to the hospital, that you're going for a particular time. Yeah. And particularly outpatients, that you're told when to be there. Same with radiotherapy. The other thing is you've got to be able to calculate how long, whether your ferry is even going to intersect with that bus anyway. Even if you're able-bodied, some of those only have 10 minutes between the ferry arrival if it's going via Devonport to get there. So people try and hurry and people can't. And if you've read those letters, and I've had personal experience of doing this and I can talk to that, because my husband had a spinal consequence of cancer, spinal injuries, surgeries, and then he got dementia, and he would simply, partly down that road, start crying because he was in pain and we couldn't do it. I had no income and neither did he at the time because I was looking after him. So that's just a reality. That's my reality, but it's the reality for the people who's, you know, if I put like a smattering of correspondence in there, that is their reality.
So the one request is just stretching that loop. It goes round in a loop anyway, if it just was stretched across the road and into Queen's Wharf.
I'm quite sure it may require separating the hospital bus route from some other routes, so be it, or taking a smaller bus. But the Wilson Home for the Disabled is a private bus, so it goes in there and picks up children with disabilities going to the North Shore to the Wilson Home.
Thanks, Daniel.
Yeah, thanks, Kath. I mean, you're right. I mean, an outpatient for a day infusion at Auckland Hospital generally needs to arrive no later than about 7:30 in the morning to get booked in to be able to begin that treatment. So I can understand the need to be there in a timely way. It seems to me, from what you have said, the only reason that service is not being extended is that it's a contracted service and nobody thought to check if the route's going to work, because it seems to me that you have exempt services that are already parking down there. So that would be an exercise in Auckland Transport looking to vary the contracted route to recover that location. Surely that's the solution for them. Or have I got that wrong?
I can't answer for Auckland Transport and their internal machinations on this. All I know is that the territory's been well defended up until now, and I just think it's time for them to say, why don't we just prioritise this and make everything work around it and figure out some other priorities? Because even with the redevelopment of that wharf, the needs of people coming off those ferries or getting to the ferries to and from hospital will not change. They're a constant. But I can't, seriously, sorry, Councillor Newman, I can't answer about the route.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. No further questions. Oh, no, sorry, Mike. Apologies, mate.
Thank you, Kath. So, I took up this cause some years ago, I think 2018 at the time, and it was pointed out to me there are different categories of people with mobility issues. Quite frequently we see the ambulance at the ferry wharves for those people who are seriously ill, and the people who, if you like, who can walk have to go to the back of Britomart. There is, of course, the total mobility scheme, which probably needs to be publicised a little bit more on Waiheke. I'm quite happy to take it up with this matter with Auckland Transport again, but it would have been good if I'd heard about this just over a year ago when I was still the director of Auckland Transport. But anyway, better late than never.
Except for, thank you, Councillor Lee, the total mobility scheme is not, first of all, it's not accessible directly from Waiheke, it's an in-city, and I've put the costs of that in the paper, but that does not apply to people with a temporary disability, say they just come out of surgery or they've got a broken leg, you know, so they are not eligible. So it's only for permanent mobility issues. Thanks, or enduring. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Last question from Julie.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to address the issue that there might be a perception that people have a choice about where they live, and having, you know, thank you for taking me on a little bit of a tour and stuff, and one of the key things we talked about was housing, the impact of transport costs, that a lot of people who live on the island don't necessarily have choices about not living on the island. So I wondered if you just wanted to address that. Thanks.
It's an unusual approach to this particular issue because that if you live on the island and you have a temporary disability, that has nothing to do with your choice of where you're living, right? And similarly with elderly people, on Waiheke, the model of care is to age in situ. There are no services. There are no services that are residential, for instance, like residential care. There's a retirement village, but it's for independent living. So people have very poor prognosis long-term if they live in their community and are transplanted out of that community into a city community. And our Citizens Advice Bureau know those people and know the prognosis is terrible, but that's backed by clinical evidence. You should always stay in your community where you will get the most and best support. So it's not a case of. I would say the other thing is we live where we live. It's not a question of, oh well, you should come over here and live here. It's just like, who would mount an argument like that? Would you depopulate and just leave the wealthy on Waiheke? Because we've got a situation emerging now where actually we've got a reversal in growth happening with family-aged people. It is already a wonderful retirement home for people 65 plus, but that population is increasing and that's going to be at the detriment of the economy long term.
Okay, thank you, Kath. You can see the resolutions up there. We've just added to that. We'll forward to Auckland Transport and Eki Panuka, and I'm happy to shepherd that forwarding, Kath, and to have that discussion.
Could I ask with what purpose?
To continue the conversation as you have just asked for, to try and get a resolution. And so we will do that. That's what we're proposing. We can't make any further resolutions on it today or decisions on it.
Thank you. I wish you well then, because, after 8 years, it's a fortress, and scaling the walls looks to me like they need to be pulled down from the inside by the executives. Thanks.
I know I'm not built like a wall scaler, but that's all right.
Thank you.
Okay, so someone like to move? Thanks, Mike. Second. Thanks, Angela. Any discussion? Those in favour say aye, and against, carried. Thanks, Kath. The next local board input is from the Waitakere Rangers local board, and I believe Greg Presland is online. So welcome, Greg. All yours.
Kia ora. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to speak today. With me is Deputy Chair Michelle Clayton, and appearing on your screen right now are a couple of resolutions that we passed at our last local board meeting. So our local board has taken a major interest in issues relating to storm damage caused by the storms last year. Previously, we advocated for full remission of rates for some affected properties, and we thank Council for doing that. I note the buyback scheme is proceeding. I personally know a few families involved who are very grateful that they've been able to extricate themselves from difficult situations, but some families are still caught up, particularly those whose properties are affected by slips that are adjacent to their properties in road reserve. And you've seen the presentation earlier today from the 5 Star Group. EQC can't help. Their insurance company will not help, and they're caught in a situation where their lives are on hold through circumstances beyond their control. I became acutely aware of this problem early on when I walked around the streets of Titirangi to see the problem firsthand, and I can recall meeting one particularly distressed resident whose access to her home had been compromised by a slip, and her property, a photograph of her property was one of the photographs that you saw earlier on. And I can also recall asking AT early on about the situation, and they said at the time that these issues would be treated on a case-by-case basis, and that landowners should talk to them and discuss the situation with them. It's clear to me now that there's a budget problem, and repair work to road reserves, which in the past has been done, is not occurring now. There's been an application for funding to the Cyclone Recovery Capability Fund that's been declined. Application to the Auckland Transport Landslip Remediation Programs failed. and Crown Infrastructure Partners have turned down a request to fund a grant scheme for residents seeking to repair private assets in the road corridor. This distinction, I suggest, is an anomaly and one that needs to be addressed. The scheme generally is to help our neighbours move on from a traumatic and dramatic event and get on with their lives. But there are some who, because of an administrative distinction, are prevented from doing so. Generally, we support Councillor Turner and Councillor Henderson's resolution, with the comment, however, that Resolution E perhaps needs to be thought through further. And finally, if I could just take the opportunity to mention the plight of residents who purchased their property at the top of the market, but who now find that with declining land values, they are in negative equity territory. And I would urge further work is done on this, perhaps by the creation of a hardship criteria in assessing applications. But I appreciate that might be a piece of work for discussion on another day. That's all I wish to say. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Greg. Any questions for Greg? Josephine.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Greg. Just really wanted to ask you if you support the NOM, because I didn't see that in your presentation up there.
In general terms, we do. We appreciate Resolution E. Have to be careful about unintended consequences, but otherwise, yes, we do support the NOM.
Thank you, and it's good to hear from you on this. And I acknowledge, I'm hearing you quiver, and I'm acknowledging what you're feeling regarding this issue for your neighbours and your community.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Greg?
Yeah, Greg, my question's around, and the earlier presenters also kind of referred to it being Auckland Council properties, and probably it's actually Auckland Transport. So when you talk about Auckland Council, are you talking about the parent here, Greg, or are you talking about the group, or is it more specifically Auckland Transport? Because that's the impression that I've been left with this morning. If you could just help clarify that.
I've used the generic group Auckland Council description. The slips that you've seen today are, I understand, all in road reserve. So specifically, it's an AT issue, but it's an issue for all of us to grapple with.
Right, Greg. And I also, I would assume that you and the deputy there might well want to be part of that process in terms of the discussions going forward as well.
We would be very happy to be involved. We've been fairly heavily involved in these issues for the last 18 months.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Greg. Karen?
Kia ora, Greg. Thank you for you both joining us this morning. I know that you've been doing a lot of work in terms of the advocacy and so on. I just wanted to ask, so in terms of the amount, is around 20 million, is it?
I've seen different figures at different times. I've seen a lower figure than that at one stage, but it may have just been council contribution, and presuming that the Crown would put in the rest, and that was a figure of 5 million.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? None. Someone like to move that we think. Thanks, Ken. Seconder, Shane. All those in favour say aye. Aye. And against, carried. Thanks, Greg. Good to see you this morning.
Yep, thanks again for the opportunity.
Okay, that takes us to item 7, extraordinary business. We have none. Item 8 is just a noting hold on the agenda to say that we